He woke up every morning before sunrise, not because he liked early hours, but because silence felt safer when the world was still asleep. The small apartment carried a quiet weight, the kind that settles after years of living alone. The walls had pictures once, memories once, laughter once. Now they were bare, like he didn't want reminders of what used to be there. His life ran on routine. Wake up, shower, coffee without sugar, work, come home. Heat, leftover food, sleep. He had built this pattern carefully, brick by brick, after learning that feelings can collapse everything if you let them roam free. Love, to him, had become a past tense concept, something he once believed in very deeply and paid heavily for at work. People described him as steady, reliable, quiet, the kind of man who never disappointed but also never surprised. He did his job well, helped when asked, and avoided personal conversations. When coworkers talked about relationships, weekend plans, or heartbreaks, he politely nodded and slowly stepped away. He didn't hate love stories. He just didn't trust them anymore. Years earlier, he had loved with full force. He gave time, patience, loyalty, and dreams. He built plans for a future that felt certain back then. But life had other ideas. Loss came suddenly and without warning, leaving him confused and hollow. After that day, love stopped feeling like a gift. It felt reckless, dangerous, something only brave or foolish. People chased, so he stopped chasing anything that could break him again. Across the city, in a different neighborhood, she lived a very different-looking life, yet carried a similar weight. Her home was warm, filled with little decorations and soft lights. From the outside, she seemed hopeful, cheerful, and open. People often said she had a kind heart, and she did. But kindness had cost her more than she liked to admit. She believed in love long after it gave her reasons not to. Each relationship started with promise and ended with disappointment. She always gave more than she received. She listened more than she was heard. Slowly, doubt started creeping into her faith. Not because she stopped believing in love, but because she began wondering if love believed in her. Still, she refused to harden her heart. She told herself that becoming closed off would be worse than being hurt again. Even on lonely nights, she chose hope. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like lighting a candle in the dark just to prove there was still some warmth left inside. Her days were busy. Work kept her moving, friends kept her smiling, and responsibilities kept her grounded. But when the noise faded and the night grew still, loneliness found its way in. She wasn't lonely because she lacked people. She was lonely because she lacked someone who truly saw her. Fate didn't announce itself when their paths started edging closer. There were no dramatic signs or emotional music playing in the background, just ordinary days, small choices, and moments that didn't feel important at the time. One afternoon, he stopped at a small cafe near his office. He rarely did that. Usually, he took his coffee alone, sitting on a bench or drinking it in his car. But that day, for no particular reason, he walked inside. The place smelled like fresh bread and warm coffee. Soft chatter floated through the air. She was there, sitting near the window, typing something on her phone. She came there often, using the cafe as a quiet place to think. When she looked up to place her order, their eyes met for a brief second. Nothing dramatic, just a polite glance, followed by a small nod. But for him, something shifted slightly. Like when a familiar song plays, and you don't realize how much you missed it until you hear the first note. They didn't talk that day. Not beyond ordering coffee and standing a safe distance apart, yet strangely, the silence didn't feel heavy. He noticed how calm the room felt with her there. She noticed how grounded he seemed, like someone who knew who he was. Even if he kept most of it hidden, that should have been the end of it. An unnoticed moment among millions of similar moments. But life has a quiet way of testing the walls people build. Days later, they crossed paths again. Same cafe, different time. This time, there were no empty seats left except one across from her. He hesitated. He almost walked back out. But something in him, something long untouched, nudged him forward. He asked politely if the seat was taken. She smiled and said no. That was it. No sparks, no bold lines. Just two people sitting across from each other, sipping coffee in shared silence. After a few minutes, she commented about the weather. He responded simply. The conversation stayed light, careful, almost shy, but neither felt the urge to rush away. He noticed he was speaking more than usual. Not about feelings, not about the past, but about simple things. Work stress, traffic, music he liked. She listened, truly listened, without interrupting or trying to fix anything. That alone felt rare. She noticed how present he was. Not distracted, not pretending, just there. When he smiled, it was subtle. Like he didn't do it often, but meant it every time. They didn't exchange numbers that day, or promises, or expectations. They simply said goodbye. Yet, when he walked back to his office, he realized the usual heaviness in his chest felt lighter. That confused him. He didn't want that confusion. He told himself it was nothing. She, on the other hand, found herself smiling for no real reason while heading home. It wasn't excitement. It was comfort. And comfort for her felt dangerously hopeful. Over the next few weeks, they continued seeing each other in small, unplanned ways. Sometimes in the cafe, sometimes on the street. Each meeting grew slightly longer. Each conversation went a little deeper. They never spoke about love, or past wounds, or expectations. They spoke about life as it was, not as they wished it to be. That honesty built something slow and steady. Still, both carried their doubts. He reminded himself daily that getting close could lead to pain. He promised himself not to let feelings grow. He believed distance was control. She reminded herself not to imagine too much. She had learned that hoping too quickly could break you silently yet. Despite these rules, something was changing. Love hadn't arrived loudly. It hadn't announced its presence. It simply waited patiently between simple conversations and shared quiet moments. Asking a single question neither of them was ready to answer yet. What if this time is different? After a while, their meetings stopped feeling accidental. They never planned them, but both quietly hoped for them. A shared look across the cafe. A familiar pause when one noticed the other. Small smiles that came naturally now, not carefully. He still told himself it meant nothing. Just conversation. Just company. He had learned how to explain things away when they felt too close to the heart. Love, he believed, always started small like this, and then asked for too much. So he stayed careful. She noticed his carefulness. The way he chose words. The way he paused before answering certain questions. The way his eyes held stories he never spoke out loud. She didn't push. She knew what it felt like when someone rushed your wounds. One evening, rain started falling while they were both inside the cafe. Heavy rain. The kind that floods the streets and erases plans. She laughed lightly and said it looked like they were both stuck. He shrugged and said he didn't mind waiting. They sat there longer than usual. The cafe grew quieter as people hurried out when the rain slowed. Outside, cars splashed through puddles. Inside, time slowed. They talked about childhood in small pieces. Not the painful parts yet. Just memories that felt safe. Games played. Food they loved. Silly mistakes. He surprised himself by opening up. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he spoke about the past, without feeling tight in the chest. She shared stories too. About dreaming big when she was younger. About believing hard work and kindness could fix anything. She laughed at herself. There was sadness underneath, he noticed. You always laugh when you talk about things that mattered to you, said softly. She looked at him for a moment, surprised. I guess I don't want them to feel heavy, she replied. Something shifted then. It wasn't romance. It was recognition. That quiet moment when two people realize the other understands more than they let on. When the rain stopped, neither rushed to leave. Eventually, they walked outside together. He offered her his jacket without thinking. She hesitated but took it. "Thank you," she said. "You can return it next time," he replied. The words slipped out naturally, and immediately both of them knew what it meant. Next time, the thought followed him home that night. He frowned at the idea, annoyed at himself. He didn't like expecting things from people. Expectations had hurt him once, deeply. Still, as he placed his keys on the table, he realized his apartment didn't feel as empty as usual. She placed the jacket carefully on a chair at home. It smelled faintly like coffee and something comforting. She didn't overthink it, but she smiled before going to sleep. Days passed. Then weeks. They started walking together after the cafe, sometimes just for 10 minutes, sometimes longer. Conversations deepened, slowly like water finding its way through cracks. He learned she helped people quietly, not for praise, just because she felt she should. He learned she often put herself last. He didn't like that. Not because it was wrong, but because he saw how tired it made her. She learned he carried responsibility like a heavy coat, worn never removed. He rarely talked about rest or joy. He talked about what needed to be done. One night, while walking under dim streetlights, she asked gently, "Do you ever think about happiness?" He took a few steps before answering. "I think about peace," he said. "Happiness feels temporary." She nodded. "Peace can grow into happiness, I think." He didn't reply, but her words stayed. There were moments when silence lingered too long. Moments when his walls almost closed again. When messages went unanswered for a day. When she wondered if she was reading too much into kindness. Each time, she chose patience. Each time, he chose to come back. One afternoon, she invited him to join her at a small community event. Nothing fancy. Just people, food, laughter. He almost said no. Crowds made him uncomfortable. So did feeling out of place. But he agreed. Watching her move through the room, greeting people warmly, helping where needed, he saw another side of her. Not just kind, but strong. She belonged wherever she stood. Someone joked that they looked good together. He stiffened. She blushed. Later, she apologized for the comment, as if it was her fault. That surprised him. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "I didn't want it to make you uncomfortable," she replied. He thought for a moment. "It did," he admitted, then added, "but not for the reason you think." She didn't ask him to explain. She waited. "I'm afraid of wanting things," he said quietly. Her heart softened at his honesty. "I'm afraid of not wanting them anymore," she replied. They stood there in silence, both holding truths they rarely shared. From that day on, the air between them felt different. He began checking his phone more often. She began wondering what it would mean if he walked away. Neither spoke of love, but love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as concern, as listening, as staying. He started noticing when she seemed tired. She noticed when his voice sounded heavier than usual. Small gestures followed. A message to check in. A cup of coffee brought without asking. Sitting together without words. Yet fear didn't disappear. One night, he canceled plans suddenly. She understood, or tried to, but doubt crept in anyway. Old memories whispered familiar warnings. The next morning, he showed up at the cafe earlier than usual. He looked tired. "I'm not good at balancing things," he said. "I'm not asking you to," she replied. "Just don't shut me out." Her honesty struck him deeper than any argument could have. He realized then how close he was to losing something before even knowing what it was, as days went on. They found a rhythm. Imperfect, honest, slow, still. Neither knew where it was heading. What they didn't realize was that love was already working quietly, reshaping old beliefs, testing old fears, and preparing both of them for the hardest part yet, the moment love would demand courage, not comfort. By the time they realized something serious was forming, it was already too late to pretend it wasn't there. Feelings had settled in quietly, like dust in a room you rarely enter. You don't notice it day by day, but one moment you look around and see it everywhere. He tried to stay in control. That had always been his strength. He believed that if he moved carefully enough, nothing could surprise him. but feelings don't follow rules. They arrive without asking and refuse to leave politely. She felt the change too. Conversations grew softer, more personal. Silence no longer felt awkward. It felt meaningful. Sometimes they sat side by side, saying nothing, and it felt like the most honest moment of the day. Yet, with closeness came fear. He started pulling back without fully realizing it. Not dramatically. Just small shifts. Shorter replies. Longer pauses. Less eye contact when the conversation brushed too close to the heart. She noticed everything, at first. She told herself she was imagining it. She didn't want to repeat old patterns of suspicion and overthinking. She believed in giving space. But space, when offered without reassurance, can quickly turn into distance. One afternoon, they walked together through a quiet street. She shared something personal, a story she rarely told because it still hurt. When she finished, she waited. He nodded kindly, but he didn't say much. That silence hurt more than harsh words would have. Later that night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. She wondered if she had shared too much. If she had crossed an unspoken line, he'd lay awake too. Her story had stirred something inside him he didn't want to face yet. It reminded him too much of his own past. Old pain he had carefully locked away. Opening up meant risking everything he had rebuilt. The next few weeks were uncomfortable. Not cold, not warm either. Somewhere in between. Conversations felt careful again, like early days. But this time the stakes were higher. She tried to bring lightness back. Jokes, casual plans, smiles. But behind it all was a question she didn't dare ask. Where is this going? He sensed her uncertainty, but didn't have the courage to address it directly. When she talked about future plans, even small ones, his body tensed. He gave vague answers. Safe answers. She felt it. One evening, instead of waiting for him to reach out, she chose honesty. "I feel like you're slowly stepping away," she said quietly. He didn't deny it right away. That silence was louder than any answer. "I don't mean to," he finally said. She waited. "I don't know how to do this without losing myself again." Her heart dropped. Not because he was cruel, but because he was honest. "I'm not asking you to lose yourself," she replied. "I'm asking you not to disappear." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit. "Getting close makes me remember things I spent years trying to forget." She understood more than she wanted to. She had her own memories too, but she had learned something different. "Forgetting didn't heal me," she said softly. "Facing it did." He looked at her, torn between relief and fear. For a moment, it felt like they were standing on opposite sides of a fragile bridge, both afraid to take the next step. After that conversation, nothing broke. But nothing fully healed either. They continued seeing each other, but uncertainty hung in the air. Some days felt close again. Others felt distant. She began questioning her own worth. Not dramatically, not out loud. Just quiet doubts creeping in during lonely moments. He began questioning his ability to love at all. One night, they attended a small gathering together. Laughter filled the room. Music played softly. Everyone looked relaxed, happy. She tried to enjoy it, but she noticed how he stayed slightly apart. How his smile looked practiced. Someone asked how long they had been together. Neither answered immediately. That pause said everything. Later, while standing outside under the night sky, she finally spoke. "I don't need promises," she said. "I just need clarity." He swallowed. "I care about you," he said. "More than I planned to, but," she asked gently, "but I'm scared that sooner or later I'll fail you." That hurt, because it sounded like he had already decided the ending. "You don't fail someone by trying," she said. He didn't answer. Days passed. Then something unexpected happened. He was forced to deal with a situation from his past, something he had avoided for years. It brought everything back. Loss, regret, guilt, instead of facing it alone as he usually did. He found himself wanting to tell her. That scared him. When they met again, he looked exhausted. She noticed immediately. "You don't look okay," she said. He hesitated, then spoke slowly. Carefully, he didn't share everything, but enough to let her see the shape of his pain. She listened. No interruptions. No fixing. When he finished, she simply said, "Thank you for trusting me." Something loosened inside him, but fear has a strange way of fighting back when it senses change. The next day, overwhelmed, he pulled away again. Missed calls. Late replies. Silence. This time, she didn't chase. She had learned that love should not feel like begging. The space scared him even more. He started to realize that protecting himself might cost him something he wasn't ready to lose when they finally met again. The air felt heavy. "I don't know how to do this," he said, "but I don't want to lose you." Her eyes filled with tears, not because she was weak, but because she was tired. "I can't stay halfway," she said. "I need to know you're choosing me, not just using me as comfort." That truth hit him hard. He had been standing still, hoping love would move around his fear, but love doesn't work like that. That night, they walked together in silence. No touching. No holding hands. Just two people facing the reality that love alone is not enough without courage, as they parted. Neither knew what the next day would bring, but one truth was clear. They both stood at a point where staying the same would hurt more than changing, and change was terrifying. After that quiet walk, neither of them slept much. The night felt too loud with thoughts they had been avoiding for weeks. Fear has a strange way of growing when silence feeds it. He sat alone in his apartment, lights off, remembering everything he had worked so hard not to remember. The loss that broke him. The promises he once believed would last forever. The way loving deeply had once left him empty. He told himself he was protecting his heart, but deep down, he knew he was slowly building a life without connection. For the first time in years, that idea scared him more than pain. She lay in her room staring at her phone, fighting the urge to send one last message. Her heart wanted reassurance, but her pride asked for respect. She reminded herself how many times in the past she had stayed in places where love was unsure, hoping it would turn into something solid. She promised herself she would never live like that again. Morning arrived quietly. He went for a long walk before work, something he rarely did. The city was waking up, people rushing, cars honking, life moving forward without waiting for anyone to feel ready. A thought wouldn't leave him alone. If love scares you this much, maybe it's because it matters. He realized he had spent years surviving instead of living. Keeping his heart locked away had kept him safe, but it also kept him alone. For the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. He was lonely, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from having no one truly know you. At the same time, she faced her own truth. She cared deeply, but caring should not mean shrinking. Love should not make you feel unwanted or unsure. She decided that if he didn't meet her with honesty, she would walk away not out of anger, but out of self-respect. That afternoon, he reached out. "Can we talk?" The message sat on her screen for a long moment before she replied, "Yes." They met in the same cafe, where everything had quietly begun. The place felt different now, heavier with memories and meaning. He arrived first, hands trembling slightly around his cup. When she walked in, he felt the urge to smile, but stopped himself. This wasn't the time for pretending everything was fine. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he spoke. "I've been afraid of saying the wrong thing," he said. "Afraid of promising something I might fail to give." She listened closely. "I thought staying distant would protect both of us," he continued. "But all it did was hurt you." Her eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. "I'm not healed," he admitted. "I carry things I don't fully understand yet, but I don't want fear deciding my life anymore," she swallowed. "I don't need perfection," she said. "I need effort. I need honesty. I need to feel chosen." He nodded slowly. "I want to choose you, even when it's uncomfortable." That statement changed the shape of the room. They talked openly for the first time. About fears. About expectations. About boundaries. About what they could give and what they couldn't, at least not yet. He spoke about the weight he carried daily. About the pressure to stay strong. About confusing silence with peace. She spoke about giving too much in the past. About being misunderstood. About learning how to ask for more without feeling guilty. There were tears. Quiet ones. Honest ones. Not because either was broken, but because they were trying. When they left the cafe, the air felt lighter. Not because everything was solved, because nothing was hidden. Any more change didn't happen overnight. There were still moments when he pulled back slightly. Still moments when she felt unsure. But now they spoke about it instead of letting it grow into silence. He started showing up differently. Small things, but consistent. Checking in. Making time. Saying how he felt, even when it scared him. She allowed herself to soften again, without losing her boundaries. She stopped assuming the worst in quiet moments and started asking instead. One evening, while sitting together watching the city lights fade into night, she asked, "What does love look like to you now?" He thought carefully. "I think love is staying, even when leaving would be easier," she smiled. "I think love is letting someone see your flaws without hiding." They both realized how much they had already changed, but life, as always, had one more test waiting. He was offered an opportunity. It could pull him away for a while. Distance, uncertainty, fear returned. Quietly, he told her immediately. They talked again. Long and honestly. No secrecy. No assumptions. She didn't beg him to stay. He didn't withdraw. "We'll face it together," she said. That word together meant everything. He understood then that love wasn't about feeling fearless. It was about choosing courage despite fear. As the night ended, he reached for her hand for the first time without hesitation. She held on for both of them. It wasn't the end of struggle. It was the beginning of trust. Time moved forward. Not gently, but honestly. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Life didn't slow down to make space for love. It tested it. He took the opportunity that required distance. Not because he wanted to leave, but because facing life together meant not hiding from growth. The goodbye wasn't dramatic. No promises wrapped in perfection. Just a long hug and a shared understanding that love was no longer something fragile. They pretended not to touch. The distance was hard. Mornings felt quieter. Nights felt longer. For the first time, both faced loneliness without confusion. They missed each other, but they weren't lost. They stayed connected in simple ways. Messages that said little but meant everything. Calls where silence was allowed. Updates about ordinary things, not forced romance. They learned love could exist without constant proof. He struggled some days. Fear returned in small waves, whispering that this closeness would still end in pain. But something inside him had changed. Instead of shutting down, he spoke. "I feel myself wanting to pull away." He admitted once. "Thank you for telling me," she replied. That response surprised him more than love ever had. No anger, no pressure. Just understanding she had her struggles too. There were moments when she felt insecure, when old habits tried to convince her that distance meant fading. Instead of letting fear speak, she chose honesty. "I miss you today," she said. "I'm right here," he answered slowly. They built something steady. When he returned, the city looked the same. But he didn't. He noticed how much lighter he felt. Not because life became easier, but because he no longer carried everything alone. They met again where it all began. Same cafe, same smell of coffee. This time, there was no hesitation. He smiled fully. She smiled back. No walls. They walked together after. Side by side, hands brushing naturally. No rush. No labels forced into place. Love. It no longer felt like something they were chasing. It felt like something they were practicing. There were still disagreements. Still misunderstandings. Sometimes silence lasted a bit too long. But now, silence didn't mean abandonment. It meant space to breathe. He learned to apologize without defending himself. She learned to accept without doubting intention. They learned love wasn't about fixing each other, it was about standing beside each other while fixing themselves. One evening, sitting quietly, she asked, "Do you ever regret not letting yourself love sooner?" He thought for a long moment. "No," he said, "because if I hadn't been broken, I wouldn't have known how much effort love needs." She nodded. "And I wouldn't have learned how to protect my heart while keeping it open." That conversation stayed with them. Seasons changed. Life continued. Love deepened, not through big gestures, but through consistency. Through showing up when tired, through honesty on difficult days, through choosing the relationship even when ego wanted to win. They didn't promise forever in grand speeches. They promised presence. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, said something he once believed he would never say again. "I'm not afraid like I used to be." She smiled softly. "That doesn't mean fear disappears. It just means it no longer controls you." He reached for her hand, familiar and steady now. "I love you," he said. She felt the weight of those words, not as pressure, but as truth. "I know," she replied, "and I choose you too." Love didn't end their struggles. It changed. How they faced them, they became proof of something rarely shown, that love doesn't need constant excitement. That love isn't about saving someone, that love isn't losing yourself. Real love is built slowly, patiently, by two imperfect people who decide to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. Years later, looking back, neither remembered love as pain anymore. They remembered it as growth, as courage, as choosing each other every single day. And that was the kind of love that changed how they saw everything. Life has a way of continuing even after happy moments settle in. Love does not pause responsibilities, nor does it stop unexpected challenges from appearing. What changed was how they faced those challenges. They moved forward slowly, not rushing major decisions, allowing space for growth. Some days were full of laughter and warmth. Other days were quiet and heavy, filled with tired minds and unanswered questions. Yet neither considered walking away. He learned something important about himself. Love did not weaken him the way he once believed. Instead, it demanded he stay present. When problems arose at work, when pressure built on his shoulders, his first instinct used to be silence. Now he spoke. Not perfectly, not all at once. But honestly, she noticed the difference. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It showed in the way he looked at her when speaking, as if making sure she truly understood him. It showed in how he asked about her day, not out of habit, but genuine care. She was changing too. She stopped over-explaining her feelings. She stopped apologizing for needing reassurance. She no longer confused patience with self-neglect. Love, she realized, should feel steady, not draining. They spent more time together doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping, cooking meals, sitting quietly after long days. These moments revealed the truth more than romance ever could. There were disagreements, small ones at first. Who forgot to respond? Who assumed too quickly? Who needed space? And who wanted closeness? At one point, an argument lingered longer than expected. "You're pulling back again," she said. "I'm just tired," he replied. Tired became silence. Silence became distance. This time, instead of letting it grow, he stopped and faced it. "I don't want fear to become our language," she said. He took a deep breath. "And I don't want exhaustion to turn into avoidance." They learned conflict did not mean danger. It meant care. As months passed, life presented a moment neither could avoid. A conversation about the future. Not dramatic, not forced, but real. "What do we want this to become?" she asked quietly one night. He didn't answer immediately. Before, that silence would have worried her. Now she waited. "I want something stable," he said finally. "Something built slowly. With you." That was enough. Love did not suddenly transform their lives into perfection. Problems still appeared. Stress still visited. Doubts still whispered sometimes. But they no longer believed those doubts had the final word. One evening, as they walked through a familiar street, they joked about how unlikely their story had once seemed. Two guarded hearts. Two people afraid for different reasons. "We almost missed this," she said. "We did," he replied. "Because fear is convincing. Fear didn't win. What did win was effort. Listening. Repairing mistakes instead of defending them. Choosing honesty even when it felt uncomfortable. They built a rhythm that felt natural. Love no longer felt like something they had to define. It simply existed in how they showed up. On a quiet night, as they sat together watching the world move outside the window, she rested her head on his shoulder. It felt calm, safe, earned. This love did not rescue them. It met them where they were. And that changed everything. Life did not slow down, even though they had learned how to stand steady together. In fact, life seemed to move faster, throwing small tests their way. Almost as if checking whether what they built was real or just another passing phase. They began to see each other not just in calm moments, but in tired ones. Early mornings when words felt heavy. Late nights when patience ran thin. This was the part of love no one talked about much. It's a part without shine. He noticed how easily stress slipped into his voice when work weighed too heavily on his mind. Before, he would have closed himself off, thinking it made him strong. Now, when she noticed the change in his tone, she didn't accuse or judge. "You seem overwhelmed," she said one evening. He exhaled slowly. "I am." That simple exchange meant more than any speech. He was learning that admitting struggle did not make him weak. It made him present. She was learning too. When he pulled inward, she no longer rushed to fix or assume the worst. She had learned his silence was not rejection. It was rest. Still, old habits have a way of returning quietly. One week they hardly saw each other. Work schedules collided. Messages grew short. Calls were delayed. Nothing was wrong, yet everything felt slightly off. She sat alone one night, wondering if this was how distance truly begins. Slowly, quietly, without warning, instead of letting fear grow roots. She chose honesty. "I feel disconnected," she said when they finally spoke. He didn't get defensive. That alone surprised her. "I felt it too," he replied. "I didn't know how to say it without worrying you." That moment mattered. They met the next day. Not to fix everything, but to reconnect. They walked without destination, speaking about nothing important. Until it all felt important again. Love, they realized, was not maintained by big conversations alone, but by small check-ins before things broke. Another challenge arrived quietly from her side this time. A sense of doubt she hadn't felt in a long while. Not about him, but about herself. She questioned whether she was becoming too comfortable, too dependent on peace. She had spent years standing strong on her own. Now, sharing life felt new and slightly frightening. One night, she voiced it. "I'm scared of losing my independence," she admitted. He listened closely. "I don't want to take anything away from you," he said. "I want to walk beside you." She believed him. They talked about space, about personal goals, about staying whole while being together. It wasn't easy, but it was real. For him, another test followed soon after. A mistake at work that brought heavy consequences. The kind that shakes your confidence and makes you question your worth. Old instincts told him to withdraw, to deal with it alone. This time, he did. He told her exactly how lost he felt. She didn't try to rescue him. She didn't offer solutions. She sat with him, steady and quiet. That support did something deep inside. He realized love wasn't about being held up. It was about not falling alone. Days passed. Slowly, his confidence returned. Not because everything was fixed, but because someone believed in him, even when he doubted himself. They spent more time laughing again. Light moments returned, but they felt earned now. One evening, while sharing a simple meal, she looked at him and said, "This feels different from anything I've known." Nodded. "Me too. It feels steady." Steady. That word stayed with them. Love no longer came with chaos or confusion. It came with consistency. They still argued sometimes. Sometimes they misunderstood each other. But each conflict ended the same way, with repair, with care, with choosing to understand instead of win. As time moved on, people around them noticed the change. Not loud happiness, but calm confidence. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. They didn't talk much about the future yet. Not because they were afraid, but because they finally trusted the present. One night, sitting quietly together, he said something unexpected. "I used to think love was something that happened to you," he said. "Now I think it's something you build." She smiled softly. Brick by brick, they sat there, both aware that love hadn't saved them. It had taught them how to stay, and staying, they knew, was the hardest and bravest choice of all. Love had become part of their daily rhythm. As normal as morning light and evening fatigue, that normality no longer scared them. What scared them was the idea of losing it. They didn't talk about fear as much anymore. It's not because it disappeared, but because it didn't control their actions. Instead of reacting, they responded. Instead of assuming, they asked. That small shift changed everything. One morning he woke up with a heavy feeling he couldn't explain. The kind that settles in your chest for no clear reason. He moved through his routine quietly. "She noticed something's on your mind," she said. He nodded. "I don't know what it is yet." She didn't demand answers. She squeezed his hand gently. "When you know I'm here?" That simple trust stayed with him all day. By evening, he understood the weight. It was not about work or stress. It was about responsibility. Loving someone deeply meant being accountable for how your choices affected another life. That thought frightened him in a way nothing else ever. Had he shared this with her that night? "I'm scared of failing us," he admitted. "Not just you. What we're building." She listened carefully, then replied, "We don't fail by trying. We fail by avoiding." Those words settled between them. Soon, life added pressure again. A family matter required his attention and time. Old patterns tempted him to handle it alone. Instead, he asked her to walk through it with him. She didn't offer solutions. She offered presence. Long days followed. Emotional conversations. Moments of exhaustion. There were nights when patience wore thin, and words came out rougher than intended. One such night ended with silence. He worried all night. Replaying the moment. She cried quietly, wondering if effort would always feel this heavy. The next morning, they faced it. "I spoke from stress, not truth," he said. "I withdrew out of hurt, not anger." She replied. They repaired the moment. That repair strengthened them more than smooth days ever did. As months passed, love asked deeper questions. What does commitment really mean? How do two people grow together without holding each other back? They didn't rush answers. They lived them. She began pursuing goals she once set aside. He encouraged her, even when it meant less time together. Watching her grow filled him with pride instead of insecurity. He, too, started making choices with more intention. Health, balance, rest. She reminded him he didn't have to carry everything alone. One quiet evening, sitting side by side, she said, "Loving you feels like breathing. Easy, but necessary." He smiled at that. "That's how I know it's real." Life continued testing them, not with dramatic storms, but with steady rain. Schedules clashed. Energy ran low. Some days, love felt quiet instead of exciting. And that was okay. They understood now that love does not need to be loud to be strong. In a moment of reflection, he said, "I used to think love needed proof every day. And now?" She asked. "Now I think trust is the proof," he answered. They noticed how differently they handled difficulties compared to before. No running, no guessing, no emotional games, just honesty. One night, while sitting together in the dim light, she asked, "Do you think people change for love?" He thought carefully. "No. I think love reveals who you're willing to become." That felt true. They weren't perfect, but they were present. Each challenge they faced quietly reshaped them, made them softer without weakening them, stronger without hardening their hearts, as they prepared for the next chapter of life, whatever it might bring. One thing was certain: love had no longer been a question. It had become a choice, and they were choosing it daily.